everyone, and welcome to the newest episode of Technically Trek. My name is Dave Prime. I am your host, and over yonder is our CNC Fleet Admiral Travis. He's filling in for Katie tonight again because she is still feeling a little. So I told her, you know what? You need to get better. You can just rest. I'll talk to Travis, see if he will fill in again, and thank you
A
for.
little R&R. She had a little. She got to need a little R&R.
Yeah, well, hopefully she'll be back next week because we're going to talk about an Enterprise episode. We'll get back into that a little later in the show, but try not to get emotional. It's going to be my soberversary on that episode. So,
Oh
well,
well,
well tech,
I mean,
technically
it,
it's the day before, but it's going to be my soberversary for this show.
okay. It'd be good for you to share it with all your colleagues and friends.
Yeah, probably going to start the show about 10-15 minutes earlier than normal, so we have a little bit extra time to talk about stuff like that because it's my show.
Yeah.
I can do what I want.
Within degree and to a
Well,
degree.
Well, it's called technically Trek, so
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
yeah, looks
Oh,
yeah, saying yeah, unfortunately some of our regulars are not going to be here this evening because like Tyson he's under the weather as well. So it's like
ah,
ah, and then
yeah,
Phil, I mean, A he's still settling into his new digs, and B
right.
he's got a friend that just decided to drop by, and yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Sometimes things come about when when you have friends want to surprise and drop in on you. Just like they don't even text or nothing. They just knock on your door. You be like scraping around, like, who? What is going on? And then you be
yeah.
like, "What? You surprised me. I did not expect you to come." But
Well, saying Jess with us, he's driving home, but he's saying, "Hope everyone's having a greasy mindset."
how
but he
you doing,
actually,
Jeff?
but he actually meant he had a bad swiping incident. He meant to say "Great Monday," so.
Oh,
but he
we do
agrees.
appreciate you,
Agreed.
Jeff.
Yeah,
Yes,
he's gonna focus in on his driving, but yeah, he wishes the best for Katie as well for a speedy recovery. So
absolutely.
hopefully, and maybe if she's up, she might be listening. She might pop in. We never know.
We never know. She could be in chat just to say hello to us.
Yep, yep.
Mhm.
But well, two things. One, gotta give a shout out to our partner W. Let's see if I can get it up there. Saying the W Energy Drink gets you the kick that you need to get through your day, whether it's through a podcast or through a long Twitch gaming session. It does. I've been taking it for about a week and a half now, and it does give you that kick, and haven't really felt the crash afterwards. So this is a little watered down. It was down to about here, and I just topped it off for the episode. So
Speaking about W, it kind of reminded me of what the last week's episode was.
hmm,
Have how you describe, it's an energy drink, but it doesn't have that, what normally energy drinks do. Just
hmm.
like the Felicium,
Oh yeah.
you know, it's not like it's not addictive, but yet it makes you, it gives you, like you said, that rush and stuff and that
Mhm.
extra energy and stuff. But it doesn't have the negative side effects, just like Felicium.
Yeah, but yeah, they got a variety of flavors. Like I this mystery flavor that I had that's actually sold out now was a cherry lollipop. I was after someone said
Mhm.
black cherry, it's like yeah, I can definitely get some cherry notes out of it, but it's just a cherry lollipop. But
Cherry lollipop.
they have a couple of flavors based on the online game Solo Leveling. They
Hmm.
got a partnership with that game, so they got great flavors there. They got Grandpa's Denture Water. They have an orange mango flavor. But if you use the code down below, Tech Trek TEKTREK, you get 10% off your order. So hopefully some of you will give it a try. They even have memberships where you pay a monthly fee and then you get always get a free tub sent every month. But
That's awesome.
if you use the code for other purchases, you should be able to get that 10% off. So I keep
So
thinking,
everybody go and try W's. You
yeah,
never know if you're gonna need it on a long trip or a flight across, the ocean or the continent.
hmm. Yeah, I'll say this would definitely come in handy during those 16-hour days driving across eastern Washington, picking up all those various medical specimens from
Wow. Mm.
UAs to blood draws to human excrement. Let's just put it that way. Yeah, say that
Oh
didn't
boy.
happen. That didn't happen often, but I had um, dry ice to keep it super cold for that trip back to the
Mhm.
lab for testing. So,
Okay, okay.
but
Wow.
we are continuing our topic on episodes that face different types of addiction. So we're talking Hippocratic Oath tonight. It's from early in Deep Space Nine's fourth season. Had a great B plot with Worf stepping on Odo's toes, trying to do an investigation. Saying, "This ain't your job anymore, dude. Get off my back." And of course, it comes to a head towards the end of the episode, which I think is great. Which kind of jump into the end of the episode. Cisco is tinkering with that clock he built during that first season episode when their minds were taken over by those entities from the Gamma Quadrant.
Yes, from that Klingon ship. Yes, yes,
Mm-hmm.
yes. I know what you're talking
Mm.
about. Yeah. Um, this episode, like you said, the B plot was, pretty interesting because it wasn't something that's really. It was because it was just a few episodes into the fourth season where Worf was the new character,
Mm-hmm.
and they was showing him still trying to acclimate into, you know, this new crew and stuff
Mm-hmm.
because like he said, on the Enterprise, he mentioned he knew where his friends were, he knew who his enemy was, and stuff
Mm-hmm.
and everything else. And he was in security for 7 years, at that
Well,
point,
close to 7 years, but
Yeah,
he was a helmsman
he's
for the first
yeah,
half of his first season.
exactly.
But I was reading the Scott McDonald, the actor who played Granagar. This is not his first rodeo. He was Tosk
Mm-mm.
back in season one of DS9.
Yes, he was.
Yeah,
Yes, he was.
he was Navek on that Next Generation episode, Face of the Enemy, that Troy gave him a dressing down to. He was
Yes,
Ensign Rollins in Caretaker. I think he kind of was one of the characters that died in the first episode there.
and oh yes, he was. He was. I want to say he was like the security officer because he was at Tuvok Station in he's talking about next gen or not next
Mm.
gen Voyager, but yeah, I think he was like the temporary security officer for
Yeah,
Janeway.
and he was Zindi Reptilian in an episode of Enterprise as well.
Um, Commander Dolam.
Yes. Yeah, I kind of
Yes.
scribbled like, yeah, oh yeah, my scribbling for commander looks like DMOR. Like, what the heck is a DMOR? But the original actor who who auditioned for the role of Granagar was turned down by the producers. They
Really?
had, yeah, they had a better idea of what to use the actor for in a future episode later that season. It was Robert Foxworth who played Admiral Layton in Paradise Lost, and that
Wow,
big
Amber Layton. Okay,
that
so they
Admiral
was gonna
Layton.
use him. Okay,
Yeah,
okay. He was what? He was the commanding officer on the Okinawa.
Okinawa. Yeah,
Yeah,
you owe me a Coke,
yeah,
dude.
yeah. And Cisco was this XO.
Yep.
I remember they talking about that, and stuff. Yeah. Okay.
And this was the first episode with O'Brien's new Pip. It went from
Yes,
the dark dot to the weird little stripy Pip thing, which I read is actually pretty spot on to what a chief petty officer wore in the U.S. Navy back then. I
I'm
don't know
glad
if
that
it's
they kind of
still the
did
same.
that.
But yeah, so it's because Starfleet is technically naval, so
And that made it simplified too, to
yeah.
to like read somebody, to look at somebody and see what Garanagar did. He looked at O'Brien's neck and saw what his his rank position was. He gave that list of, blah blah blah, and then he looked at Bashir, said lieutenant. He was like, O'Brien was a high priority versus medical science doctors were a low priority. So you could see how the Dominion prioritized, people in Starfleet,
Hmm.
by their ranks and stuff and everything else. And that's one of their, I guess, profile for, identifying Federation people,
I
or I should
think
say
that would,
Starfleet officers.
yeah. Um, and the one other like note, because I have almost a page of notes just well, did show up on the camera that well. This is one of 8 episodes Rene Auberjonois directed.
Okay, Renee Auberjonois directed. Okay.
Yeah, but he said that out of the 8 that he directed, this one stands out to him the most because I think it goes to show the conflict that both Bashir and O'Brien had during that episode, which I was thinking that because their friendship was still a little rocky at going there, even after the Armageddon game episode that we talked about earlier this year.
That they did what usually come up in usually Star Trek in this thing, and which I always appreciate, the moral and ethical dilemma of them in a situation, whether if should they help or not to help,
Mm-hmm.
you know, based on the information presented to them, because they have to still follow the guideline of the Prime Directive, you know, and they have to walk that very tightrope of, yes, you know, should we get involved or shouldn't we get involved? And then two, you saw both different side points from, as I was saying last week too, about like Dr. Bashir, like Garanagar said, and O'Brien quoted Garanagar, you know, that he is trained to feel compassion and sympathy, because he's a medical doctor.
Mm-hmm.
Versus O'Brien, he's not without compassion or sympathy. But at the end, when he looked at when Garanagar looked at O'Brien and said, "Are you a soldier?" He said, "Yes, I am." He said, "You explain it to him." And that goes show you the difference that he understood Garanagar and O'Brien, even though they didn't get along, but they understood each other as soldiers. Versus Bashir, he saw he has the best intention, but it goes to the point where he will put everything ahead of his judgment, everything that will cloud his judgment when it comes to looking at the situation at hand. Like O'Brien, they debated it when they was debated in the when they was sitting there debating whether or not they should help them and stuff. It became a really good argument on, wow, what would you do in a situation to be captured by, and they wasn't enemies at the time, but they was adversaries because they didn't. The Starfleet did not officially, or say the Federation does not defeat, has not officially claimed war with the Dominion, or the Dominion claimed war. They was adversaries, and that said, you look at that and you be like, any help that you give them will only strengthen their hand. The less help you give them, it weakens them to the point where you can find a way to escape, which O'Brien pointed out and stuff and everything else. And to a degree, Bashir was on board. And then when Garanagar explained to him, the more exactly why are they there, or what, because according to the scans and stuff, that system was uh about 6 weeks away from the nearest Dominion, I guess, space station outpost or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So they was long off course. And they didn't expect it because of course the magneton was at the magneton pulse that they detected, gave the position away. He understood he started to get inside, not so much get inside, but started to tell Dr. Bashir why they was there and what reason they was there for, and stuff. And then you can start hearing, as Julian do, we've seen this many times throughout, the D Space Nine, you know, Julian gets real sucked in a sense. He wants to help as a human being. He wants to help and stuff and everything else. But, you know, O'Brien saw it in one perspective. He saw it in a different way, you know. And when they first landed on the planet, well, I say crash landed on the planet when they got shot down. How much white did he say they have for? Uh, how many days they
Six,
have?
6 days worth, I think.
And by the end, he said that they only have one more day left before the white runs out. So they spend a little time with with this and with the Jemadars and stuff. And also too, we got the first. I believe this is the first time we ever heard of the name Tetracell White.
Yes. Yeah, they just
You
referred
know,
to it as an enzyme before.
and because I never heard of it until then, I was like, oh, they really got a name for it and stuff and everything else. You know, and it's really interesting to see because we talked about this being this month of addiction. The the part started, what was really getting, I guess you can see in Bashir is, you know, synthesize the enzyme, that they need to survive. It's like he always thought, he said even he thought that without the enzyme, that their whole system will collapse and stuff and everything else. But like Renegar, he was basically a anomaly. He is proof that you know the Vorta controls the drugs, and the drug is provided from by the Vorta and stuff, and it keeps them in check. It keeps them in line. Like he said, they're slaves to to the founders and stuff. They Renegar said that he fought racists that believed in gods and stuff, and he said he never seen the founder. You look at that and you start to realize that, wow, they really hooked this species onto a drug to make them literally think that they will die without the drug. Just like last week episode.
Yeah.
It
And
was it really touched on to that about the addiction part and everything else. And it's like when Bashir tried to found out any kind of environmental, he went through everything environmental, to animals and stuff and everything else. He just realized maybe you guys are not dependent on the drug. It's just something that literally keeps them under control.
I
But
hate to
O'Brien
do.
didn't make a
I got to step away for like 2 minutes, hopefully less. I'll be right back. But I mean, if you want to keep on talking other stuff, I mean, I'll still hear you.
okay, okay. But in the sense,
Sorry,
it
everybody.
makes it David be back. Don't mean if it seems like I'm talking to myself, he can actually still hear. Okay, but in this, you can see too that the renegade wasn't not just trying to get it, wing his man from the drug and stuff and everything else. Like Bashir said, he was questioning the whole, the whole identity of, his being, what his purpose is, what being connected, you know, to the Dominion, what it stands for and stuff and everything. Like he talked about like fighting races that believe in gods, and he was questioning, that his gods don't, his gods never answer him and stuff and everything else. And I'm not saying that they do that the Jem'Hadar pray to the founders and stuff and everything. I wouldn't say, but whatever they do to, I don't know how you put it and everything else, but like, to ask the founders for whatever, just like the Bajorans will ask, the prophets for guidance and stuff and everything. Do the Jem'Hadar as um the founders for guidance. That's just a little thing that, I always thought about and everything. But like, not saying that they do, but like, if there was such a prayer, what would a Jim Hadar prayer look like to the founders? Because they worship them as gods and stuff and everything. But not to get sidetrack about the addiction part, but the argument between Bashir and O'Brien, it really made you wonder and put yourself in both party shoes and stuff and everything else. And it was hard to so much pick a side in a sense. You could say if one, because you want to look at it like this too. I looked at it like this. Say doing, and I'm just using this. I mean, I know probably get flack for this and something like that and everything else. And if you anybody in the comments want to correct me and stuff, but think about during the Second World War. You know, yes, there have got shot down. On both sides of the war, and one side was a doctor who got shot down and stuff, and they needed a doctor who was on the ally side, to help them, and help help their soldiers and help them and stuff like that. Now the question is, would that doctor, as a human being, will want to just help in a sense because they're other human beings, because these human beings are actually going to, they are the ones that's trying to kill you and your fellow soldiers because you're on the other side. You're on the opposite side of the war and stuff. And it's like, should I or should I not help to, to ease their suffering if there was a suffering going on and stuff? Because we saw that there was like, you could say it was a suffering because they was addicted to catch a cell white. And, you know, when they was lined up and the second was, you know, I guess just observing them stuff, and they was like, have the withdrawals and stuff. And Garanagar took Bashir to show him what they're dealing with. You could see that at the end there was tremors and stuff and everything else, and he's like, "Now please give them the white and stuff and everything," because he hates to see suffering.
Mm.
He Bashir hates that the suffering to no end, even though he wants to get them off the drug, but he would rather keep them on the drug until he found a way and stuff and everything. But
Exactly.
he never did, and the only
Well,
literally proof of it was Garanagar. And you know what? We never even after that, after this episode, we never even heard of Garanagar anymore. It was like, I wonder what happened to him in a sense, because he was the only Jim Hadar to, wing himself of the white.
well, but
And
in the episode though, it just seemed like he might have been a genetic abnormality because his body was producing its own white enough for him to survive on. So I mean, he wasn't.
and that's Bashir mentioned that too. It could have been a genetic abnormality. It could be something. He didn't have enough time to run any kind of test because O'Brien basically destroyed, his work, and he wanted to run more tests to see what makes him different. What genetically, what is his genetic structure different from their genetic structure? He said his body was producing just the amount of white for him where he don't have to use external white. His bike had white in him, but he didn't need it extra. You know, so who knew what could have possibly been, because it, like you said, it could have been a genetic abnormality, some sort of mutation. He said the conditions were right at this time that he crash landed. on that planet.
I mean, he could have had the abnormality before the crash, and then as he was weaning himself off the white, and he realized that he wasn't craving it, that
Yeah.
yeah, it's kind of like with most every meeting I go to, it's out of the big book saying that I mean, there are those individuals that can drink like a gentleman or a gentle person, depending on what kind of room you're in. Say our hats are truly off to those people that can drink without just getting shit faced
Hmm.
and just lose their faculties and all that. So he could be the perfect example of something like that. It's just like he's a someone that doesn't need the drug to survive because in his case he's making it himself somehow. But as you
Yeah, his
said,
body was producing.
yeah, as you said, Bashir didn't get the opportunity to study Granagar further to see what was in his system that was doing that because his initial scans were he didn't have enough time to figure it out because he was baffled.
Yeah. I mean, he was baffled. He was like, I thought your whole system, your whole system will collapse without the drug. That's what that's what Jim Hadars were created or bred to do and stuff and everything. It's like, oh my goodness. So well, they threw that little thing in the history of, like, not the history, but like for us fans to understand that the Jim Hadar, in a sense, not saying that they have an ability, but one, Jim Hadar proven that there might be a way to be off the Kitchen Cell White and no longer be under the hand of the Vorta.
That's a good point. So yeah, Bashir being Bashir, you'd think he would try and study it further to try and figure that stuff out. But
Mhm. But O'Brien, you could tell O'Brien was he was just baffled that Julian would want to go along and help with trying to help them and stuff because O'Brien saw it. From his point of view, he was a soldier. They're
mm-hmm.
soldiers. Either they kill us, or we almost kill them. But he wanted to get away. He's not about like trying to actually murder them, but he just wanted to get away. Killing them will be in one of the last desperate act that he will want to do. But yeah, that's one of the things. He's not one to want confrontation with a species like the Jem'Hadar.
Say the thing the analogies I can come up with for both O'Brien and Bashir, battle worn and naivete. Saying because Bashir's
Yes,
still kind of wet around the ears and he hasn't really been out in the front lines like O'Brien has. Like Setlick 3,
yes.
prime example right there during the Cardassian
Uh,
Wars.
oh boy, the horrors that he saw and he done, that really made him the kind of person that we saw him throughout Deep Space Nine.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, yeah, Setlick 3. That and then too, not saying, but do you remember the episode? It was in uh, season 5. Yes, it was season 5, and um, it was Julian and Jake was in a runabout. They was coming back. They was coming back from whatever stuff and everything else, and they got a distress call,
Mm-hmm.
and you know they were still fighting. They were still fighting the Klingons on a certain planet because there was still negotiation going on and everything else. You would think too, in a sense, that's one of the. It was later on, but like that would give Dr. Bashir more perspective on how things are done on the front line on the front line in a skirmish
Mm.
war, whatever you want to call it, and stuff and everything else. It really shook Jake up to the point where we would say you know he he experienced something that very few will ever admit to, and stuff. But
Yeah.
either, to understand like when we talking about O'Brien, to understand the plights of having not sympathies for your enemy, but like getting caught by them and trying to help them. It's a very fine line.
Mm. Yeah, the episode you're thinking of is "Nor the Battle to the Strong."
That's right.
I was kind of thinking that might be the episode name. I want to double check, make sure. I didn't want to seem like an idiot.
Oh boy. But also too, let me talk about this too. When they discover the magneton pulse,
Mm,
it's interesting when they discover, there was a magneton pulse, and it was from a basically, as O'Brien says, usually is
yeah.
it
Jeff is
utilized huh?
Jeff is home, so he can chime in now. So yay.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. But the magneton pulse,
Mm,
it's not the first time that we ever heard that they use the magneton pulse. Well, the word magneton pulse and stuff and everything else. Usually, as that they discover is due to some sort of damaged warp core from a ship. But also, Doctor what's that? Dr. Lenan Khan,
Lenara Khan, yeah.
she used a magneton pulse in a sense to create an artificial wormhole.
Wormhole. Hmm.
And that was in what's that? Regenerated,
Rejoin.
rejoining,
Which
rejoin.
that is an episode that is going to be on a future episode. I'm debating on doing it in either October or June. I'm leaning towards next month. So,
Okay, okay. Also, too, the D69 to the death. Do
mm,
you remember in that episode is when they was returning from D Space Nine, and they found that the station has been attacked and one of the
mm,
upper pylons was destroyed, and when they realized it was a rogue Jem'Hadar, you know, I guess soldiers and stuff and everything else. Well, when they entered the Gamma Quadrant and they were scanning for the ion trail, they said I remember they said something about they used a magneton pulse to
mm,
master ion trail, and
yeah,
it was dissipating really fast. They were using the magneton pulse. I remember I heard that a couple of times, so that's a little neat little you know
tidbit.
technical thing that I like, that I have heard
Yeah.
that you know in Deep Space Nine a few times that season.
Yeah, but talking about the episode, they rebuilt that pylon pretty darn fast back to factory specs.
I wonder, just in the future, when you see space stations, something like that of that magnitude, just how fast do they rebuild, external damage,
Mm.
sections of, like you said, that pylon was destroyed. It's like, wow, they must have, worked in a Bajoran system, I guess, 26 hours to repair it that
Yeah,
quickly. Well, they clock 26 hours a day and stuff, but it's pretty impressive that they can rebuild and stuff like that. Of course, in that time, we don't know the technological um, advances that they have, that they can construct something in a very meaningful time. Just how many people, what like I know they call them worker bees,
hmm,
stuff like that. Just the little things.
yeah.
Who knows?
Same. Going just kind of going earlier in the episode when Bashir was essentially playing counselor with O'Brien, and saying when Keiko came home from Bajor, she was upset that Miles had a bunch of like his workshop was in the bedroom, and Bashir's just being honest, saying that it's like, well, it can be construed as you're just trying to be close to her by doing something intimate you like in an intimate place, and all of a sudden O'Brien's like agreeing. He's like, yeah, that's totally right. Say, why can't she be more like? And he just kind of like stops himself right there. He's just like,
He and then he was like, what?"
like
Just like and then, he was like, just he wanted he didn't want to say it, but he wanted to say it, not wanted to say it, but then when he said it, I was thought he was gonna say, first time I seen it, I thought he was gonna say more like you,
that was
but
my
he's when he said more like a man, and then he was like, "So you want Keiko to be more like a man?" I
yeah
thought it
saying
was, go ahead.
yeah, but then it kind of end caps the episode when they were kind of like getting closer in that regard, and then at the end of the episode, he's like, well, "We're supposed to play darts tonight," and it's like I don't feel like it.
Yeah,
It's
I
like
don't feel, yeah, I don't feel like, playing any darts or anything and stuff because what they went through, they had a process, for both of them, they had a process, you know, their feelings, I mean, O'Brien explained why he did it, and to a degree, Bashir was just he was a little disgusted with O'Brien
mm-hmm.
because he's basically said, "You question my judgment, you question my authority, you question and stuff like that, and everything. I'm your superior officer and stuff." And he said, "I saved your life." It was like, you didn't see it, but I saw it. You would have been killed. He's just like just told him that he was just trying to say, I saved your life. He said he hoped you can understand that, but who knows what Julian felt in that moment and stuff and everything else. Because we've seen that one time before in a uh uh in the episode. I don't know if it was this episode or the quickening
Mm-hmm.
the quickening episode. It was late it was in the late it was late that season when they discover, you know, the world where the quickening.
Yeah, the blight.
And when it, he refused to leave until he found basically a cure or a form of inoculation. And he told Major Cure and Dax, y'all come back for me later. I'ma stay and stuff. He was basically wanting to seem like he wanted to do that in a sense, like what happened on this planet. He seemed like he will want to just stay in the muck of it because he was so immersed in trying to help,
Mm.
not thinking about the potential danger, and stuff. That
No,
with somebody like him being from the other side of the galaxy, you know, of course, they said, uh, not lieutenants, but like people in the science and medical field are low priority. The Dominion don't consider them, you know, worth capturing.
got to put my note on the door. I'm not sure if I heard someone knocking or not, but yeah, yeah. Watching Bashir in this episode as well as the quickening you were mentioning, there's definitely probably just a little bit of ego involved. As saying
Mhm.
when once Bashir kind of like sets his mind on something, he's like full in hyper focusing. He is like, this is my cause. I'm gonna figure this out. And even in the episode of the quickening, he was just like, I thought I could figure it out in a couple of days, and he's getting frustrated with himself because he couldn't get it resolved in a few days.
Do you remember when Odo was when they found out that Odo's was if he was patient zero of the morphogenic virus.
Mm-hmm.
He basically shut everybody out and he went straight. You could understand it because they're friends and stuff and everything else, but he was singular focused that he could find a cure. Even Bashir told, or not Bashir, O'Brien told him the Dominion have the entire, the founders have the entire Dominion at their disposal, and they can't even find a cure. What makes him think? Because yes, he's genetically enhanced, and he's a medical doctor and stuff and everything else, and he can his brain works more different than others and stuff and everything. That's one reason probably why, not saying, but the morphogenic virus was created, to keep somebody like him from finding a cure on their own. Whoever knows and stuff. We know that it was a Starfleet made virus and stuff and everything, but it just shows
Well,
you how singular focus he gets in a situation, like you just pointed out, about his his ego. And at the time, we did not know he was genetically enhanced.
yeah.
We did not know. No, nobody knew, but him and his parents.
I don't think Alexander Siddig knew. So,
Can't exploit that. Yeah.
but yeah, it's kind of funny. We're talking about that and saying that was the episode where Odo was infected was Homefront Paradise Lost with Admiral Layton.
It's like, wow, they went way back there and stuff and everything. It was like when he was at Starfleet Medical, it was like, wow, they really, I mean, the Dominion really scared the hell out of, Starfleet and the Federation.
Early on.
It was like, who's more scarier, the Dominion or the Borg?
Mm.
I mean, it begs the question. Of course, we saw at the same time, you know, the, that they wasn't thinking about the Borg incursion and stuff and everything else because the Dominion War lasted for 2 years and stuff and everything else, and most of their resources was taken up on defending the Federation against you know an enemy that literally had the ability not only to replicate to shapeshift into another human being or creature or any individual, but they can actually shapeshift into like an inanimate object, the surface of a table or a table itself and everything else. It's just like, how do you fight an enemy that can do such a thing? You know,
And when you scan that thing, it initial scan show up saying you scan it, they turn into a table. You scan it, it's a table. You scan a cloud, they're a cloud.
it's pretty remarkable, and stuff. And it's not so much, given the moral and ethical dilemma about like, using Odo as a carrier of the virus to his people and stuff and everything. But you know, it goes to show you the desperation in that sense and stuff. But we're not to get off subject of hand stuff like that and everything because we're talking about addiction and stuff.
Yeah,
You know,
but I mean, it's that's the main topic. That's the episode's topic is on that.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
um, but I guess in a different way, say Worf is dealing with a different type of addiction is work. Say he spent
Mm.
so many years as chief of security on the Enterprise, he's just on that mindset. He needs to do something security related to feel useful while he slowly integrates himself into the new command structure. But Odo
And
keeps on telling
yeah,
him back off, and he keeps on pushing forward.
and Kira was like, Odo's watching him. He didn't because he was still new. Even Cisco, they say, give it time. It's like, you're new. You don't understand Odo. And like he was so because he was sitting there with the pad. Just I'm like, first of all, Ward, if you're a former security officer, you wouldn't be in a public place with somebody mugshot
No.
stirring that deal. I'm like, what is
And
this about? You sitting there, and then the bartender alone. You already know the bartender that's walking around. He ain't gonna stand there behind you and see that you're, eyeballing,
one of his
one of his.
patrons.
Yeah, it's like he just called him. He called him out loudly. Nobody really paid attention, but he called him out loudly and stuff. He was like, we don't discriminate. I don't discriminate here at Quarks, and I don't think Starfleet really discriminates too and stuff. It's
Yeah,
like,
see,
oh.
the way I wrote notes on that, Quark being Quark.
Yes.
Yeah, he's trying to humiliate Worf to get him out of the bar.
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely. And it's like, Worf. he said it. And Cisco said it. Odo is chief of security. You are strategic operations officer who coordinates, you know, of the strategic operations in in the sector
Yeah,
in the
about the
system.
Klingons and all that. Yeah,
He was like, "You're not in security anymore." And stuff. It's like, Worf, you got to let that go. Yes, he may be a criminal. When he brought the information to Odo's attention, he was like, "Okay, thank you for telling me that. I appreciate that little, stuff like that." But like Worf kept put more pressure on Odo to do something.
yeah.
Only then at the end when when the deal was going through and stuff and everything, he basically Odo said, he was just a small fish. I wanted to go for the big fish. He basically said,
And
I
he
knew,
screwed. Yeah, and
and he screwed it
Odo
up.
called him. Yeah, he called on and said, "You just done screwed it up. Now I just got this guy."
Yeah,
And
you know.
yeah,
Go
and
ahead.
I think like Quark was just like, "What are you doing here?" Then Odo shapeshifts out from the bag, and it's like, "I'm thinking the same question." But
and
Worf
uh,
did swallow his pride and went to Cisco saying, "Hey, I read Odo's report. He left something out." And Cisco's like, "I know."
you know something about that particular. This is what because Worf was still new to
Hmm.
um the station and everything. Cisco, he took it in stride. He didn't yell at him. He didn't chastise
Yeah.
him. He didn't dress him down or nothing.
No.
He understood. He understood that he came from a structure or from a starship structure
Hmm.
versus how did he put it? He said there are more shades of gray on Deep
Yep.
Space Nine.
And Quark is definitely a shade of gray.
He definitely was. Oh man, it was pretty interesting. How he put that. I'm like, that makes a lot of sense and stuff, and that goes back to when Wolf quarters got broken into, and he caught the thief, and he drug him to
Right.
uh Odo's
Odo's
office.
court. Yeah.
It was pretty funny. It's like, oh yeah,
This never happened on the Enterprise. And then he's like, Odo was prepared for that. He had his pad ready, saying, "On this star date, this happened. This star date, this happened." He mentioned Brilliant Hot Rasmussen. Great episode. Matter of perspective, or not a
yes,
matter of
yes,
perspective, but God,
yes,
what was the
yes.
name of that
It,
episode?
it was it was pretty funny. It goes back to Worf, trying to he didn't feel inclusiveness, in the sense of Deep Space Nine when he first got there, and that's
Hmm.
why we saw later on he went to live on the Defiant because he felt like it was more secure for him.
I think it was more comfort than anything for him.
That yeah, yeah, absolutely.
But he did eventually move back to the station when he and Jadzia were an item. But he remained to stay on the station after Ducat killed her.
That was something. Yeah, yeah, I remember that. Yeah, that was something.
Yeah, so just Worf's growth as a character really went a good arc there, going on DS9.
You look at him when he was in TNG, and then you look at him in Deep Space Nine, and you see his entire arc, his entire story arc and stuff. You really come to appreciate, just how much they, you know, they utilize the character. They made more so of the character in Deep Space Nine than they did in the first few season of TNG.
Hmm.
You know, and his character arcs grew. The Worf character arc grew more and more and stuff and everything else. But it was nice to know that we saw him, and it was still something crazy to me when I first heard that Michael Dorn was going to be a full cast member in the fourth season of Deep Space Nine. I was just like, I remember hearing about it on, and forgive me, anybody, don't judge me. It was at that time, it was the 90s, it was Entertainment Tonight.
Mhm.
And, I used to get some of my entertainment news from Entertainment Tonight. And I was just floored when, I heard about that. I was like, how are they going to even do this? It was something that just, you know, amazed and stuff. And I was just still, because this was just what, the third episode in, the third or fourth episode in.
Well, it depends
Uh,
on. Well, it depends on how you count the episodes. If Way of the Warriors 2 episodes, since it's a two-parter, it's episode 4. If
yeah,
it's like the one part, it's episode 3. So
it was still it was still new to me just to watch him, to watch him, you know, on Deep Space Nine. It was still a little off for me and everything else at that time, and I was still getting used to Worf being on Deep Space Nine, just
mhm.
as he was getting used to being on Deep Space Nine.
Yeah, but I mean, kind of going along that tagline, as saying when it came to the movies after Generations, is like how are you going to get Worf in there? So First Contact, he was commanding the Defiant to defeat the Borg at Earth because the Defiant was designed to fight Borg, so that makes absolute sense. Say, but Insurrection, he just happened to be in the neighborhood and just like, wow, that's like a real bad way of doing it. But by
And
Nemesis, he was back on the Enterprise, so
yeah,
so
they could have done that a little bit
we
better.
never got that story about why he left Kronos to go back to Starfleet, even though even though Martok was still Chancellor
Said he was going to be Federation ambassador. It was
to Kronos.
like,
Yeah.
to me when I saw, I was like, w- that whole thing is just like, maybe he gave up because he's like, I miss being in Starfleet. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that's one of the things that they could toy with and say, he missed being in Starfleet. He's not much of a politician, and he wanted to go back and stuff, which was pretty interesting to see. They bought, in Picard season 3, they bought all their TNG cast back together again. It was just it was done it was done so well, and stuff. But as you was talking about, little funny thing. I don't know if anybody knows and stuff like that, but the Defiant was supposed to be destroyed in, was that First Contact?
Yeah,
They were supposed
she's
to
a drift.
destroy.
Well, she was adrift but salvageable, so that's why there's a future episode of DS9 where they said that the Defiant was under repairs after its battle at Earth.
But the people, the movie people wanted to destroy the Defiant, but the two producers of DS9 said, no, that's basically our hero ship and stuff and everything else, and you know, find a way to you know keep the Defiant, in, so we can explain, so it could be explained, why we haven't seen it and stuff and everything else and stuff, because in the movies they was going to destroy the ship, but that was a little thing that I did not know for a very, very long time. I just recently found that out. I was just like, wow. So the ship was supposed to be destroyed, but um, the two producers of DS9 said, no, no, no. I gotta find a way to keep the ship without destroying it.
Yeah, and it looks like one of the comics that IDW put out is saying kind of explains Worf's return coming to Starfleet. So it's beta canon, but it's hmm,
It's something that you can kind of work with, that they can make it into canon, you know.
I'll see. But yeah, we were yeah say yeah Jeff, we were talking about that a bit ago, but I say wish Keiko was more like a man. See, yeah, saying we were both saying that we think at first O'Brien was going to say it's going to be more like Bashir specifically, not just
Yeah,
anybody.
yeah, that's what we thought. I thought that too. I was like, hmm, okay. But they said a man.
Well,
um,
yeah, same, but well. we would need to get a lot more straight men into the chat to kind of see if they've been thinking that too. Say Travis and I are not the best references for that.
It's like, you and your boy, y'all both have girlfriends and stuff, but yeah, your girlfriends don't know and stuff, and y'all like to hang out with each other more so. And sometimes your girlfriend, you just be like, damn, I wish sometime you was like, my buddy. Where I don't have to argue with him as I argue with you.
Was it? He is like Garrick. Yeah, you know what? I mean, well, Bashir. I mean, he did take a shot at Garrick in Our Man Bashir when they were stuck in the hollow
And the,
suite, and he says, "You're not gonna
yeah,
shoot me." When he pop grazes his ear.
yeah, yeah, he really did. I was like, wow, that's ballsy of Bashir.
Yeah,
He knew the stakes was high.
saying so. Yeah, Bashir being a real life hero.
That was a
But yeah,
pretty
did
interesting
you
episode.
yeah see? Yeah, Jeff's had those thoughts.
uh,
But I mean, I always say what better for a man than to know what button another having another man to know what buttons to push, something like that. Yeah.
no, that's
Well,
true.
that might go a little too far for some straight guys, but yeah, just like guys know where the pleasure spots are at. Might be a little
Be like, oh man, you look like you. It's
Yeah,
like
Tyson's missing a good one.
I know. It's like, uh, my man, you look like you stressed out. You need a good back massage. You need like a real like hand on your shoulders and your shoulders and back and stuff. You need a massage, just
Mm,
to loosen the tension up. uh,
yeah, then of course it goes back to a body and soul that we talked about that scene where Seven was getting the massage while the doctor was inhibiting her body and getting the massage. You became sexually aroused in my body.
I'm glad Seven knew, what arousal means because it's like, she grew up for most of her childhood to adult life, and she never experienced,
Yeah,
sexual pleasure and stuff, but she
because
understood at the time what sexual arousal was. Oh boy. That was pretty funny.
but what did I write down?
But there was not that much in this episode that, that really, you know, did anything that was just all inspiring in the sense and stuff like it. It just gave us a little bit more background, little bits and pieces on the Dominion, for
Yeah, and
Starfleet.
and the Jem'Hadar specifically. We
Hmm.
got to learn their structure a little bit, and same with when Amata climbed, he started losing confidence in the other men. He was definitely def- mentally defeated, just like they're not trusting me anymore. They're not going to listen to me anymore.
Yep.
They're going to kill you no matter what. Even though
Oh
he
yeah.
wouldn't, but it's just like he said that he failed, and as he said at the end of the episode, he couldn't leave because he couldn't leave his men, even though he betrayed his men. He's still responsible for them.
And you ask, not saying that people in the military today or way back, back in the days and stuff would be, in that way, be like, if they have a unit and their unit loses confidence in their, superior, and the superior just go out and starts to murder them, stuff like that. But yeah, it was structured in a way of showing what a alien species, structure is like, versus a, human military structure stuff and everything. You know, they was at the end, I could see, in a sense. I'm not saying that you're supposed to experiment, but I was wondering. I always wonder what would happen if he didn't kill them and they went their separate way because they was on a deserted planet, and they all went their separate ways, not to even cross paths with each other. What would happen to them, in a sense, for a duration of period without the drug and no contact with anybody, just like how the Renegade was? Would something similar happen to them like the Renegade if they didn't have no one around? But they was
There,
basically designed to be killers and fighters and killers, I should say.
Jeff brings up an interesting point, saying that the episode could have been called interference due to the way Miles kept on interfering with Bashir's efforts to try
Yep.
and kick the effects of catch yourself white addiction, but then also with
Yeah.
Worf interfering with Odo's investigation. Yeah, I never thought of
Oh
that
yeah.
before.
That's a really good title name. Interference. I mean, we saw the A plot and B plot,
Yeah, both
and
both both very strong. And say again, it kind of goes with what we've talked about when we did a series on friendship, when Bashir and Brian started to really get along, and then of course they kind
Mhm,
of grew apart a little bit after this episode because Bashir set in his ways about being a medical doctor and being one that wants to heal no matter friend or enemy. He is there to help. And say whereas O'Brien being the war worn soldier, he just like these are our enemies. Screw them. And the the episode with Captain Maxwell, his O'Brien's former CEO, saying that he is saying that he doesn't hate Cardassians because of who they are. He hates them for what they've made him become because of them,
mm,
because of the war. And that
yeah.
definitely a little bit of that, even though that it's Jim Hadar, it kind of shows there's just that low key resentment towards his enemy.
Was that called the Wounded or something?
No,
No,
oh, it's a hold on. Let me see if I still have what episode is
because I
this
remember
for.
what episode because it was in the fourth season of
Oh yeah, the fourth.
TNG.
Yeah, it is the wounded. I was thinking the DS9 episode, but yeah, the wounded.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. That re-
Oh, you froze up on me. Yeah, I'm not frozen. Oh, technical difficulties. Please stand by, everybody. And I'm gonna text him really quick. Do 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 do. If I had the Jeopardy theme, I'd be playing that right now. Ah, got. Oh, we lost Travis. Maybe he'll come back. Are you back? Maybe. You back?
yes. Can you hear me?
I can hear you now. Yeah. So you totally froze on us there. I don't know what happened.
I was like, all I saw was just from both. I was like, oh, what happened? We having some technical glitch?
I think so. So everything was looking fine on my end, but yeah, you just like you weren't moving.
Well, I was trying to get beamed up to, one of the starships in orbit.
Yeah.
But no, it was good that it was something that you said about bringing back Maxwell and stuff. It was like
Mm,
O'Brien sees he sees the world. Both him and Bashir sees the world in well, the universe should say in a different way. You know, you pointed out, how empathy, compassion, you know, rules Bashir's, identity.
mm,
But when it comes to O'Brien, he's in that shade of gray. I'm not saying that
yeah,
they have sympathy and stuff like that. That shade of gray, that Cisco mentioned in a sense, you know, that's where O'Brien is. He's not one to, basically hate and stuff and everything else, even though he mentioned it to that Cardassian in 10 forward in TNG, he hate what he become because you know, of him, because of, his, species and stuff. But
mm,
he doesn't want to feel like that. He's not one to feel like that, but he understands that there are beings, no matter what, want to see your downfall. And it's hard to have sympathy for, you know, species that want to see your destruction.
yeah. And I got the direct quote pulled up. It's not you I hate, Cardassian. I hate what I became because of you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Absolutely.
And saying
Wow.
so, yeah. And saying so, yeah, because he became a little because he was saying he'd be squared to swat a mosquito before set like three, but now after that he's just like and he's a different man. He's a different person because of that war. And then
Absolutely.
he's reliving it again with the Dominion War.
And then as the Julian Bashir story arc goes,
Mm,
we seen we seen him go against his own principles and stuff and everything because he has taken life. Uh, do you remember in the what's that the seventh season, the episode The Siege of AR five
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 eight?
seven five. Yeah, the episode where Dog loses his leg. 558.
Yeah,
Yep, yep.
everybody had a phaser, a weapon in their hands, even Dr. Bashir
And Quark.
and Quark, except for Nog. We know why, but Dr. Bashir, we saw that naivete kind of fall a little bit to the wayside because it was a war, and he did understand either me or them. There's no like having compassion and stuff like that, you know. Yes, I'm back, Jeff.
So yeah, because yeah, Jeff put in a couple of also here. Hmm.
Oh, okay.
Interesting.
And then he said it goes against the Geneva Convention.
Yep.
Okay,
Interesting.
interesting. Okay, okay.
Yeah. Hmm.
Hmm. That's a very interesting
Yeah.
way of looking at it, or looking
Well,
in
look
a
at
certain aspect.
well, Jeff knows these things, so kudos on that, man.
Oh, thank you, Jeff. Thank you. We appreciate that.
Yeah, because I mean,
But
a lot of the Starfleet charter is based off of the Geneva Convention, from what I understand. So,
with a little interpretation of what future is supposed to be like. Future.
hmm.
What if and stuff. Of course, uh, we got to understand too that not to get off subject at hand, but Section 31
Hmm.
was created under the Starfleet, under Starfleet,
This
the original
charter.
Starfleet charter. You know, And that's the one thing too. It's like, wow, they put that in there too, and nobody really questioned it, but it was in part of Starfleet charter, and it became, I guess, part of the when Starfleet, well, when Earth became part of the Federation, it just grew.
Alright, so we got that, we got that, we got that. Let me just look at my notes one last time here because I think we pretty much hit everything that I wrote, and we kind of bounced around the episode, but it was a fluid process, so it's all good.
Right. But still like the little intelligence that we got on, the Jem'Hadar.
Oh yeah.
I like that, because it seemed like the Dominion always got, is 2 or 3 steps ahead of intelligence gathering. And this is one little intelligence gathering that, they have to report back to their superiors.
Mm-hmm.
It was like, okay, I'm glad that, that they don't go away with something empty handed.
Mm. But I
And it was a
think
good thing.
overall,
I was gonna say it was a good thing too that there was no other they didn't bring anybody else with them, like, one of those non-speaking characters that will get killed or shot, or as they say, a red shirt or something. But yeah, I'm glad it was just them two because it's like, oh man, they had to have somebody in there to die. They need to kill a Starfleet personnel off.
yeah, but I think we're going to call it good for this episode. Then that way I got a few minutes to relax before I have to head out the door for my AA meeting. But like, unless there's any closing thoughts that you wanted to add to it, Travis,
Uh no, there's not much I can say. It's just been one of those one of those episodes where,
it makes you
it
think.
just it makes you think about, like, the moral ethical dilemma of helping your enemy to strengthen their hand or to weaken their hand,
Hmm.
or strengthen your hand or weaken your hand, in a situation of suffering.
But for next week, I kind of touch base on it. Hopefully, Katie will be back next week because I mean she definitely is started to enjoy Enterprise. So we're going to talk about damage where T'Pol has to go through her addiction and withdrawals through the Trillium D
Tr-
that she has to take
Mm.
to be able to survive going through the expanse because he can see in her face that she's definitely not doing good, and the more that she takes it the more that she's starting to damage her neurology and all
Oh
that.
yeah.
So
Oh yeah.
it's been a couple of years since I've watched this episode, so I'm definitely looking forward to that.
Yeah.
Um,
Me too. Me too.
yeah, so glad you're a part of it, Jeff.
Yes, Jeff. We
But
appreciate you being part of this.
yeah, so like some like our regulars, Tyson, he's also feeling ill. Katie was feeling ill, so didn't have them. Phil, he had a last minute house guest at his new place, so he had to that took precedent, which is totally fine. But
Unexpected things come up.
exactly, life throws you curveballs, and you just make lemonade out of it.
And yeah, you roll with it, and you just say, oh, okay, well, what's done is done.
Exactly. But until next week, my peoples is saying, may Spock be with you.
Live long and